G'day, Tom Tanuki here, shop steward with the CFMEU. Yeah, real tradie. I work in shelving. A proper trade. You put the shelves in. Yeah, yeah. Touch one, touch all. Have you got a moment to talk about the New World Order, mate? So listen, I wanted to do a quick video about yesterday's attack on the CFMEU building. I had a lot to say. Don't know if you were watching my Twitter, but there was a big thread about it. Go check that out. But essentially what I was saying was that a lot of them weren't actually with the CFMEU. Not all, but a lot. And I was getting responses from people, which were making me laugh because I understood where they were coming from, saying, this has Trump saying that Antifa were behind the insurrection type vibes. And I get it. So I thought I wanted to quickly clarify what happened in the lead up from my perspective in terms of the anti-lockdown organising behind it, and what my take is on the people that approached the officers, and also what's going on with the unions themselves. Going back about a month, just after the last big anti-lockdown rallies in Melbourne, I saw a flyer come up in some of the other conspiracist groups. And this was a flyer saying, all unionists, all members of all unions, come along and, strike outside the union offices to show them that you're, against mandatory vaccines. It was worded strangely. Now, what this actually was a pretty clever, I thought, attempt by the anti-lockdown organisers to sweep union members who are anti-vaxxers already, who have become red-pilled from fucking Facebook and Telegram, out from under the feet of the unions, many of which have been vacillating, not trying to take too firm a stance on vaccines, so as to not alienate those members. So it did force some of the unions to come out a little bit later on to say, we don't condone this strike, we don't endorse it, it's not a union rally. But nonetheless, it was there. And I saw it as a pretty clever move. And I will say as well, this wasn't the first time they've done something like this. A little while ago, they organised what they presented as being nurse or aged care worker strikes. Now, there weren't even actually many aged care workers there. I'm not saying that there aren't red-pilled or anti-vax aged care workers or nurses. I'm just saying that the majority of the people at the rally were anti-vaxxers, and they would pick the small handful of people who were actually aged care workers or nurses at those strikes and interview them or elevate them. It wasn't a majority of them, and it certainly wasn't an industry strike as such. It was an anti-vax strike masquerading as an industry strike. And that's just what happened again here. Now, if you go back over the course of the last week, you did have a legitimate union rally over tea rooms last Friday. There was a bit of a perfect storm timing-wise, because only a day after that legitimate union tea room strike, which, might I add, there were apparently many people there who were kind of hoping it was also a little bit about mandatory vaccines, the anti-vax numbers among them. Only a day after that was the scheduled date of that sort of fake union strike that I mentioned. That also coincided with the staunch anti-lockdown protests, which have really just become a gaggle of fucking disorganised hard men, barreling through cop lines. All of that provided a bit of a perfect storm. So when you look at all that, in addition to Daniel Andrews looking hard at the construction sector, which in fact after yesterday turned into a full 2-week halt on all construction, you can see why there's a bit of a perfect storm that culminated in yesterday on people approaching the CFMEU offices. And again, behind this, the actual people who put the flyer out about saying go to CFMEU was Melbourne Freedom Rallies, an anti-lockdown group led by far-right shithead Harrison McLean. When I say that group is led by Harrison McLean, in truth, he doesn't do any fucking leading. He just creates these events, invariably doesn't even rock up to them. How many people can I get to materialise at something who I can then take no responsibility for? So this CFMEU thing, masquerading as a union thing, it's got touch one, touch all or something written on it, so they're LARPing as unionists making the event now. They're savvy enough to recognise that there are quite a few unionists or blokes in the construction sector who, are terrified about mandatory vaccines, and, you know, they want to make their voices heard. So yeah, the event gets posted up. Bunch of real tradies in the comments of the Telegram post are saying to each other, even if you don't work in construction, just go down there. Indeed, and this may sound real Antifa or behind the insurrection, but I think it's worth noting, someone called up 3AW and said they were travelling through, about a block away from where the protest was that morning, and they saw a bunch of blokes in, just casual attire get out and get changed into high vis in order to go along there. Now, does that mean... Look, I used the word astroturfed yesterday, and that's a very strong word. To me, that implies that a rally has been paid for by someone. And so I probably used the wrong word there. I'm not saying that. I am saying that a lot of anti-vaxxers who weren't members of the CFMEU, or perhaps possibly not even in the construction sector per se, have the requisite cheek, the fucking nerve, to go along to CFMEU, even if they're not in it, and say to them, we demand that you do X, Y, and Z. In this case, they demand that CFMEU preside over a 2-week shutdown of the sector. I do say cheek, because, I mean, who the fuck do you think you are if you're not in the CFMEU going along to tell John Setka what to fucking do? At the same time, I'm also going to say, I know for a fact there were CFMEU people there. Do I have the numbers? I don't have the numbers. It's impossible for me to say. Okay? So yes, I know there were members there. And yes, I know there were construction workers from other sectors who went along there that day. For example, you can see them in the crowd. You see toll workers there. They're not CFMEU, they're TWU. But nonetheless, they were there. Okay? I don't have the numbers. It's impossible to gather the numbers. But what I'm saying is that fundamentally, this is not a union or a union rally or strike. Fundamentally, it was an anti-vax rally that anti-vaxxers were trying to encourage people, whether they were in the construction sector or not, to go along and stand in solidarity with them. And I think quite a number of those people standing in solidarity put some high vis on. So yeah, I'm watching the live streams from the day. I'm hearing people say things like, I heard one boss say, it costs too much to employ tradies, which sounds like real unionist talk, doesn't it? I heard another person, they said, I reckon the Labor and the unions are all in on it together. And I'm like, you're not a fucking unionist, mate. You just don't say that shit. Towards the end, there's this other cooker, and he's bellowing at the cops. He's going, why don't you drop on one knee? Why don't you take a knee for a white man, you fucking communist cunts? I don't know what you are, champ, but you're not a fucking unionist. So on the day, things were relatively calm until John Setka came out to try and face the tradies, and he tries to talk to him. He doesn't get a word in edgeways. They start screaming. They've got no coordination, no leadership. You can see that from last Saturday. All you've got is a bunch of fucking losers like Harris and McLean who funnel these red-pilled conspiracists into events and then take no fucking responsibility for them. They don't do marshals. They don't do coordinators. They don't do police liaisons. They don't do anything because they don't even go, like in Harrison's case half the time. They just send the people there and then wash their fucking hands of it, whether that be for plausible deniability or not, who fucking knows. But, so all these people are there and they start cutting sick at John Setka, even though they say they want to hear him, they don't listen to him. So he goes back in after 10 minutes, and that is when they start trashing the fucking CFMEU quarters. They start throwing shit at it. Eventually, after a while, and Setka won't come back out to talk to them, and I'm thinking, why the fuck would he go out to talk to them? They start hosing them down outside the office, because it did look for a moment there like these blokes were actually going to storm inside the CFMEU quarters, which would have been really, really brave of them. I mean, CFMEU people are not to be played lightly with. And there were a bunch of actually conspiracy theorists online who were saying, they've got the bikies to come and protect them. Can I just say, I don't think the CFMEU need bikies to protect them. I think the numbers of the rank and file CFMEU people are more than enough to protect the CFMEU, yeah? At that point, the riot police showed up and did what they've now done for the second time, which is to start firing rubber bullets at people, which is fucking terrifying. Some of the live streamers, like Real Rukshan, were saying, oh, this was a peaceful event. I mean, it wasn't a peaceful event. You know, they were trashing the CFMEU quarters, but at the same time, you know, I'm never going to sit here and wish fucking police violence against anyone. Because next thing it'll be me and my comrades. And actually, can I just say, if you're a member of the left who sits there cheering on the cops when they attack people, you're like, you know, fucking comrade of mine, you can get fucked. You know. Now, CFMEU later on in the day ended up releasing a press statement basically saying the same thing I was doing, which helped to ratify some of my feelings and make me feel a little bit like, yeah, all right, you think I'm the only one saying here that, you know, fucking Antifa started the insurrection. Well, fucking, you know, the union in question appears to be backing up what I'm saying. More importantly than that, though, there's two separate conversations here, all right? And I don't want one to detract from the other. And one conversation is how the event was basically an anti-vax one masquerading as a union one. And in fact, they're set to continue doing it today. They can smell blood, so they're ready to go back there today. I think all they're going to see is a wall of riot police, frankly. But nevertheless, you know, that's what's happening. They're going to keep going. There's one conversation about the fact that anti-vaxxers have managed to successfully, you know, make the union chase its own tail and so on and so forth. You know, they're doing a real number on the unions. There's another question as well, which is, have unions like the CFMEU fucked around for 18 months, sitting on the fence to try and piss off a few members, you know, a growing group of members who were like anti-vaxxers or whatever, and basically created the situation that they're in now? The answer to that, I think, is yes, and I don't want the conversation that I was having yesterday about saying a lot of these members aren't actually members of the unions to detract from the fact that the unions have a real problem here, and those unions, many of those unions, help to create that fucking problem themselves. And what I believe they need to do is they need to get out there and say that vaccines need to happen, that they encourage, they insist that all their members get vaccines, and that is a measure to protect each other in the workplace, because it fucking is. It doesn't actually need a great deal of explanation to say that, you know, getting vaccinated so you play your role in protecting your co-workers at your workplace is a collectivist measure. It's fucking obvious. The only people it isn't obvious to is blokes who've been getting red-pilled in online fucking spaces, Facebook and Telegram, for 18 months. And they need to get back to the real world on their own fucking time. But unions need to look out for the health and safety of their workers. They'll do it when it comes to any other WHS or RHS issue. Why can't they do it over this? In fact, they do need to. This can't be a fence-sitting measure where you go, oh, you know, we think that maybe you should get the voluntary vaccine, maybe. You end up allowing these shitheads, like with yesterday and presumably today, through the fucking gate. You end up letting them dictate the conversation because they can see that you're retreating. We're in the business end of a pandemic, and that is going to require that people, and not just the people out there at the anti-lockdown rallies barrelling through cop lines, but also people who believe in the collectivist measure of protecting each other by getting ourselves vaccinated, that we show some fucking spine, and that organisations responsible for us show our spine. You're not going to be able to sit on the fence around this if you're a union. As a lifelong union member myself, I would leave my fucking union if they capitulated completely to anti-vaxxers. Either way, you're going to lose some members here, it seems. Ideally, they should have done something a while ago, but what they're going to now need to do is to show some fucking spine and to wholeheartedly reject the anti-vax line. It's a public safety, public health measure, and the safety of your co-workers is collectivism. Anyway, that's smoko for me done. Touch one, touch all. Back onto the Real Tradie worksite. Anti-Lockdown Ode is a tribute to the anti-lockdown movement and to the freedom that we all have to punch on in Coles. Digital only from Melbourne Fringe 5th to the 10th of October 2021. Buy tickets in the description. And in the meantime, if you love what I do, please support us on Patreon.